Transformations, Women, Gender, and Psychology, 3rd edition by Mary Crawford. Chapter 8, Commitments, Women and Close Relationships. Rosalind Carter and her husband, former President Jimmy Carter, have been married for 70 years. According to the Carters, their marriage has been long and happy because of their shared ideals and because they enjoy activities together: skiing, bird watching, biking. They both are working for world peace through the Carter Center. When people marry, they hope it will last a lifetime. These hopes are encouraged by couples like Rosalind and Jimmy, who have made lives of mutual love and respect together. It's not just a Democratic thing either. Former President George Bush and his wife Barbara have beat the Carters' record by being married for 71 years. However, despite these examples, not all marriages work out well, and there are enduring commitments to a partner other than marriage. Until recently, gay and lesbian couples did not have the right to marry, and more heterosexual couples live together without getting married. In this chapter, we explore the kind of commitments couples make to each other and the consequences of these commitments for women. Marriage. As a very old joke puts it, marriage is an institution, but who wants to live in an institution? The joke recognizes that marriage is a way that society regulates private relationships between couples. Laws and status stipulate who may marry whom. For example, in the past, interracial marriages were forbidden. Laws also regulate the minimum age for marriage, the division of property when marriages dissolve, indeed whether they are permitted to dissolve, and the responsibility of each partner within the marriage. What behaviors constitute grounds for divorce? Religious codes and social norms also regulate marriage and divorce. Although people in Western societies are aware that marriage is a legal contract subject to regulation by the state, they rarely think of it that way in relation to themselves. Rather, they are influenced by the ideology of love and romance, choosing their partner as individuals and expecting to live out their married lives according to their own needs and wishes. Nevertheless, the right and responsibility imposed by the state may have consequences for both partners, especially when a marriage ends. Patriarchal traditions are slow to change. Even in the 21st century, people expect a man to propose by getting down on one knee and presenting a woman with a diamond ring. In a survey, 2/3 of U.S. college students said they would definitely want the man to be the one to propose, and not a single student, male or female, said they would definitely want the woman to propose. The reason they gave for leaving it to the guy were mostly gender-based traditions. One man simply said, "Because I'm the man." A woman said, "It would be more romantic. I'd be able to sell the story to my girlfriends." When people marry, they are not just establishing a personal relationship. They are fitting into a script, social institution. The idea of marriage is larger than any individual marriage. The role of husband or wife is greater than any individual who takes on that role. Who marries and when? More than 90% of people in the U.S. marry at some time in their lives. According to the U.S. Census data, marital patterns are divergent across ethnic groups. For example, African American women are the least likely of any group to be married. However, there have been very little research on marriages using African American, Hispanic, Asian American, or other ethnic group samples, and little on working class people. Most research on American marriage has been done with white middle class samples, and it's helpful to keep the bias in mind while exploring this topic. In general, women marry at younger ages than men do. Women in developing areas of the world marry very young. In many parts of Africa and Asia, the average young woman is married before she reaches the age of 20. And child marriage is a persistent form of oppression. In the U.S., women are marrying later than they used to. According to the most recent census, the median first-time bride is 26 and a half, and the median groom is 28.7 years old. Just a generation or so ago, she was 20 and he was 22. A similar trend toward later marriage is occurring in other developing countries. Why are American women marrying later? They are more likely than women of previous generations to invest in higher education. Also, advances in contraception have made premarital sex and living together arrangements less risky. For Black women, there is a shortage of marriageable men due to a number of socioeconomic forces. Economic factors may play a part too when young people find it difficult to become financially independent. Whatever the cause, the tendency to marry later has important implications for women. A woman can do a lot of living between 20 and 26 and a half. She can finish job training, college, or internships. She can get started on a job or career, support herself independently, learn how to manage her money, and live on her own. She can have relationships, exploring her sexuality and what she wants in a partner. All in all, she is likely to enter marriage at a later age with a well-developed identity and broad horizons for her life. Who marries whom? In a cross-cultural study, more than 9,000 people from 37 nations representing every part of the world were asked to assess the importance of 31 characteristics in a potential mate. The characteristics included good health, chastity, dependability, intelligence, social status, religious background, neatness, ambition, and sociability. The biggest difference across culture was in a cluster of characteristics reflecting traditional values such as premarital virginity, being a good cook and housekeeper, and a desire for a home and children. For example, samples from China, Indonesia, India, and Iran placed great importance on virginity. Those from Scandinavia considered it irrelevant. Overall, cultural differences were much more important than gender differences. Men and women from the same culture were more similar in their mate preferences than were men from different cultures or women from different cultures. In fact, men's and women's ranking were virtually identical overall, with a correlation of positive 0.95. This gender similarity suggests that each culture, whether Bulgarian, Irish, Japanese, Zambian, Venezuelan, or whatever, socializes men and women to accept its particular script for marriage. When all 37 cultures were considered, an overall picture of an ideal mate emerged. Both women and men rated mutual attraction and love, dependable character, emotional stability, and pleasing dispositions as the four most important characteristics in a potential marriage partner. There were some gender differences, however, across cultures, women were more likely to emphasize a partner's earning capacity, while men were more likely to emphasize physical attractiveness. Women's desire for a man with material resources became a matter of theoretical controversy because some evolutionary psychologists claimed it is a cross-cultural universal built into the human species, related to the female need for a male to invest in offsprings. Other psychologists, those with a sociocultural orientation, believe that this difference might be largely due to women's historical lack of opportunities to provide for themselves. Psychologist Alice Eagley was the first to test this theory by showing that women's preference for men with marital resources was greatest in countries where women had the least ability to gain resources on their own, where they were denied equal access to education and jobs. Since then, using more sophisticated measures of gender equality in more nations around the world, and reanalyzing the data from the original 37-nation study, researchers have shown that gender differences in mate preferences shrink as women gain more equality in each country. As women make progress towards gender equality, what they look for in a mate changes. They focus less on prospective mate financial prospects and ambition, and more on his sociability, education, intelligence, and their mutual attraction. This flexibility in women's mating preference suggests that choosing a high-status, wealthy man is not so much a result of evolutionary pressure as a way of coping with patriarchy. Varieties of marriage. In the U.S., many marriage patterns coexist. I will classify marriages into three types: traditional, modern, and egalitarian, based on three important characteristics: the division of authority, how spousal roles are defined, and the amounts of companionship and shared activities they provide. Traditional marriage. In a traditional marriage, both the husband and wife agree that the husband should have great authority. He is the head of the family or the boss. Even in areas in which the wife has some decision-making responsibilities, such as household shopping, he retains veto power over her decision. The wife is a full-time homemaker who does not work for pay. Clear distinctions are made between the husband and wife's responsibilities. She is responsible for home and child care, and he is the breadwinner. Couples in these marriages may not expect to be best friends. Rather, the wife finds companionship with other women, neighbors, sisters, and other kin or members of her church. The husband's friendship networks are with male kin and co-workers, and his leisure activities take place apart from his wife. Attitudes towards traditional marriage have changed a great deal in the past few decades. These changes do not mean that marriage based on traditional beliefs and values are entirely a thing of the past. Certain religious groups still strongly endorse traditional marriage. For example, Orthodox Jews, Latter-day Saints, some evangelic Christian sects, and the Promise Keepers and Nation of Islam insist that distinct gender roles and submission by the wife to her husband are necessary for marital and societal stability. About 29% of women with children under 18 are stay-at-home moms, a portion that has increased in recent years. A couple may plan for the wife to keep on working after they have children, but change their minds once the first baby arrives, and their marriage soon becomes more traditional than they expected. Here, two traditional husbands described in an interview how they decided their wives would stay home with the children. My daughter was 18 hours old, and I was holding her in the room that night with my wife there, and I just looked at my daughter and I told my wife, I said, "There's no way I can put this child in daycare." I was afraid to touch this boy all the time because he was so small. That was not even an option for me to stay home. I'd have to call her all day asking, "Honey, how do you do this? How do you do this thing on him?" And, no, that was not even a question. Modern marriage. In modern marriage, the spouse has a senior partner, junior partner, or peer relationship. Modern wives work outside of the home, but by mutual agreement, the wife's job is less important than the husband's. He is the breadwinner, and she is just working to help out. Moreover, it is expected that her paid employment will not interfere with her responsibilities for housework and childcare. Within modern marriage, the husband and wife may spend an equal amount of time on paid work. But that work has different meanings because of the belief that man is the real provider. Modern couples emphasize companionship and expect to share leisure activities. They value togetherness and may discuss husband-wife roles rather than taking them for granted as more traditional couples do. Modern marriage may seem to be a relationship of equality when compared with traditional marriage, but the equality is relative, because wives have more responsibility for the home and the children. Modern wives do a second shift every day. They put in a day's work for pay and another day's work when they get home. The kids expect mom to do the second shift of childcare and think it would be unfair if dad had to do it. The unequal division of labor in modern marriage is normative and hard to change. So too is the greater priority given to the husband's job or career. A nation data set of couples surveyed during the recession of 2007 to 2009, wives were more likely to say they would move 500 miles if their husbands were offered a good job than husbands were to say they would do the same for their wives. Even in the tough economic climate of recession, couples were not willing to prioritize a wife's career. Egalitarian marriage. Egalitarian marriage, once relatively rare, is becoming more common. In egalitarian marriages, the partners have equal power and authority. They also share responsibilities equally without respect to gender roles. For example, one partner's paid job is not allowed to take precedence over the others. In particular terms, this means that either partner might relocate to accommodate the other's promotion, or either would agree to miss work to care for a sick child. Egalitarian fathers do not believe that their wives are unequally qualified to do all the childcare. They are comfortable with using daycare and preschool helpers. As one father of two said, children with stay-at-home moms are not necessarily better off. When they're 5 years old and they have been at home their whole life, they do not do very good in getting into school. They're suddenly not used to sharing things. They're not used to having all of these other people. They're not used to being away from mom. The ever-present tasks of running a household, cleaning, cooking, bill paying, errands, are allocated by interest and ability, not because certain jobs are supposed to be women's work and others men's work. One wife in an egalitarian relationship described her commitment to non-sexist task allocation like this. I believe that people should be flexible. A woman, if she can fix the light, she should fix the light. I don't believe in taking care of husbands. When I'm still showering, he irons the clothes for me. Even cooking is not fixed, although I love to cook. Such marriages are post-gender relationships. The partners have moved beyond using gender to define their marital roles. More than any other type of marriage, an egalitarian relationship provides the couple with intimacy, companionship, and mutual respect. This husband, whose wife's educational and job status are equal to his own, both have master's degree and their job rank is similar, says that he has no need to feel superior to her. I need the relationship to be equal. If I am in a more dominant kind of position, this will not make me feel right. I would only feel as if I'm not able to engage with the most important person in my life at the level I would like to engage in. Because egalitarian couples share a great deal, they are likely to understand each other, communicate well, and choose to spend a lot of time together. Often, each partner says that the other is their best friend, precious and irreplaceable, and that their relationship is unique. Power in marriage. Different marriage types reflect different beliefs about what the duties of husbands and wives should be and how they should relate to each other. Completely egalitarian marriages are still relatively rare. Although Americans like to think of marriage as an equal partnership, men may still end up having power. Why is it that the result of a stroll down the aisle, in the words I do, is often a long-term state of inequality? One definition of power is the ability to get one's way or influence decisions. In classic studies of marital power in the 1960s and 70s, sociologists found severe imbalances. For example, 60% of men decided whether their wives were allowed to hold a paying job. In a study of Canadian households, 76% of wives said that the husband was the boss, and only 30% said both had equal power. Although the imbalance is no longer so extreme, more recent research confirms that marital equality is not the norm. Fewer than 1/3 of heterosexual dual-career couples share marital roles in egalitarian ways. For the majority, although roles and responsibilities are more balanced, than in traditional marriage, there may still be a constant pattern of inequality that is accepted by both partners. For example, even though women and men agree that women do far more housework and childcare in the most marriages, most don't see it as a problem. In a major survey, first conducted in 1980 and replicated in 2000, The majority of respondents in both time periods said that this imbalance was fair. Couples may construct a myth of equality, refusing to acknowledge how socialization and social forces have steered them toward traditional roles. How do couples justify marital inequality? Power in marriage is both structural and ideological. It is related to societal structures that give men greater status and earning power, and also to belief about who is better at nurturing or more suited to doing housework. How is marital power exerted and justified? How do couples create myths of equality and explain away inequalities in their own marriages? When a sample of highly educated dual career couples was asked about other couples' relationships, they defined equality in terms of task sharing. However, when asked about their own relationship, they talked less about who did the cooking and cleaning than about abstract concepts like mutual respect. In fact, most of the people had not achieved their ideal of equality. The women did more household work and their careers were secondary to that of their husbands' careers. They did not focus on adding up who did what around the house, perhaps because it would make the inequality painfully apparent. Redefining the situation is a common way to avoid perceiving injustices of all kinds. In an in-depth study of 17 British couples, the wives and husbands were first interviewed together, and then 18 months later they were interviewed separately. The researcher was aware that in general married couples might not openly acknowledge inequality. Ideologically, most couples believe that marriage is supposed to be about love, sharing, and mutual respect. Wives might particularly unable to challenge inequalities in their marriage because of being dependent on a husband's income or having young children to take care of. Openly admitting this dissatisfaction might be emotionally almost too hard to bear. For husbands, admitting inequality might lead to a loss of power and privilege. Therefore, the researcher analyzed the interview data for subtle ways that the women and men justified the status quo. The women used distancing, talking about behavior and roles in vague, hypothetical terms, rather than challenging their husbands openly. They minimized conflict or blamed themselves when it happened. It's only silly little things we fight about, and maybe I take them too seriously. They also made positive comparisons between their husbands and other people's husbands. Some women have it really bad. Their husbands don't do a thing to help. So I'm in a fairly equal situation. These strategies help the women create a vision of relative marital fairness for themselves and the interviewer. Although the women's challenges were indirect and hedged with self-blame, the men often tried to deflect them. Without actually mentioning inequality, their strategies included describing their wives as inadequate. If she were better organized, she could get all of her work done with time left over, and themselves as hard done by, having to work long hours and needing more time out with the boys. The researcher noted that the husband reflected back to their wives a negative identity that the wives had already created through self-blame, a subtle undermining process that had the power to exacerbate in women a sense of lack of confidence, low self-esteem, and in some cases depression. Clearly, these couples were doing gender in ways that preserved and perpetuated inequality in their marriages. What are the sources of men's greater power? Many factors are associated with husbands' dominance in marriage. Social class and ethnicity make a difference. Black and working couples have less of a power difference between white middle and upper class couples. Wives who are employed have more power than those who work only at home. White middle class women in traditional marriages have less marital power than other groups of women. One reason the power balance in marriages is weighted in favor of men is the influence of traditional gender ideology. If either or both spouses believe that the man should be in charge, he is likely to have more decision-making power. Traditional gender ideology is strongest in collectivist cultures, which stress responsibility to one's family and society above individual needs. Women in collectivist cultures are not allowed to prioritize their careers, to say no to serving men and children, or to place their own needs first. In a study of newly married couples in Singapore, a highly developed and economically successful Asian republic, some were working towards egalitarian relationships, while others were still voicing traditional values about gender. One wife stated, "The man must always be the man of the house. He will make the major decisions." Another couple asked about power and the authority in their marriage, agreed with each other. "I have to be supportive. I still believe that behind every successful man is a wife, a loving wife. I would have more authority because our mindset is of the older generation." This traditional gender ideology is not limited to collective cultures. In the U.S., it is often related to faith-based attitudes. God intended women and men to play different roles, or beliefs about human nature. Gender differences are natural and built into the species. For example, James, a school counselor, and Kwan, an accountant, have one child and another on the way. It is Kwan who insists that James is rightfully in charge. "I want the father to be the head of the household, and I want him to lead or make important decisions." She describes her husband as a big thinker and stronger than she is, and describes herself as emotional. He says it's not natural for him to notice housework that needs doing, and that is why Kwan usually does it. Another explanation for greater male power in marriage comes from social exchange theory. This theory proposes that the partner who brings greater outside resources to the relationship will have the greater influence in it. The partner who has less to offer, be it status, money, or knowledge, will likely take a backseat. Gender confers status on men in itself, and husbands usually earn more than wives, even when both are employed full-time. This is true for a variety of reasons that we will discuss in Chapter 10. As already noted, wives who have no income or employment of their own have the least power of any group of married women. Moreover, the husband in most marriages traditionally has had a higher level of education than the wife. In American society, educational attainment brings status and prestige in itself, and is also associated with higher income. When the husband earns more money, couples agree that he automatically has the right to make financial decisions for the family. But the money he brings also may give the husband the right to make other decisions that have nothing to do with the money. In a British study, one wife described how things changed when she began to earn money on her own. "Before, I had 5 children and was very vulnerable. I avoided raising some issues because I was worried that he would stop giving me any money. He threatened it a couple of times and that was enough. Now, things have changed. I'm not so quiet about things I don't like now." Because of its practical and symbolic importance, it is not surprising that fights about money plague many marriages. In a study where 200 husbands and wives kept diaries about the conflicts they had with each other, money was not the topic they fought about most often. Children and chores topped the list. However, the fights about money were more severe, more problematic, and more likely to reoccur, even though couples kept trying to resolve them. Social exchange theory is limited. It has focused on economic exchange while ignoring the symbolic value of gender roles. The breadwinner or provider role, still more important for men than women, means that men's capacity to earn money is more highly valued than their capacity to nurturing children. For women, on the other hand, providing nurturance to husband and children is more valued than the ability to earn money. Even if a wife brings in as much money as her husband, she might not have equal power because her success is seen as undermining his provider role and interfering with her nurturing role. In other words, the same resources, in this case earned income, may function differently for husband and wife. Just how central is earning power to marital equality? Does it influence work the same way for husbands and wives? To answer these questions, it is necessary to study couples in which the wives earn as much or more than the husbands. Couples like these used to be rare, but today about 30% of wives earn more than their husbands. In one study, 30 couples in which the wife earned at least one-third more than the husband were compared with an equal number of couples in which the husband earned at least one-third more than the wives. Respondents were asked questions about the relative importance of careers and decision-making power. Consistent with social exchange theory, spouses who earned more saw their careers as more important and also had more to say at home than spouses who earned less. Nevertheless, wives overall had less say in financial decisions, had more responsibility for children and housework, and felt that their husbands' careers were more important than their own. In a more recent study, couples were interviewed repeatedly over a 2-year period. In each couple, the wife earned at least $10,000 more than her husband. And in the same couples, the gap was as much as $120,000. These couples struggled with how to honor the man's provider role, even though he was not bringing home most of the bacon. One strategy they used to pool their money into a shared account, making the gendered earning differences less obvious. A comparison group of couples in which the men earned more did not use this money management strategy nearly as much. Instead, each spouse paid expenses in proportions to his or her income. The meaning of earning more money differences between white and racial ethnic groups for African American women who traditionally have had vital roles as wage earners for their families. Earning more than their husbands affected their marital happiness negatively only if they also were highly religious and traditional in gender beliefs. To sum it up, equal access to money can be an equalizer of power in marriage, but even when wives earn more money than their husbands, beliefs about the appropriate roles of women and men may still influence the balance of power in favor of men. This implies that in order to change power imbalances in marriages, both women's economic power and couples' gender ideologies will have to change. Because women's earning power seems to be changing faster than gender ideology, couples where the woman out-earns the man use strategies like pooling their incomes to cope with the embarrassments of being gender deviant. The good news is that marriage equality is increasing in many parts of the world. Women are becoming more educated and economically equal relative to men and are marrying at a later age, so they bring more resources to their own to the relationships. The traditional ideology of patriarchy is losing its hold. Egalitarian marriage is not yet the norm, but it is becoming more and more common and may be the wave of the future.